Next, we have tapas. Tapas. For those of you who are beginning writing Sanskrit, this is a good one to practice with because there are very few changes from the alphabet. So first we have the letter ta. Ta is written like this. Next we have the letter pa. Pa is written like this. And then we have the letter sa. Sa is written like this, except we're dropping that last vowel. So instead of tapasa, we're going to say tapas, and we're going to drop that final sound. So tapas. Tapas means something like vigorous effort. It can also mean sort of that fiery energy of practice, of dedication to one's practice. It can also mean austerity, which sometimes in the West I think gets a bad rap. But austerity isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Think about the phrase doing more with less. And here in the West, I certainly can observe the ways in which my life is pretty plush, right? And there are definitely ways in which I can practice sort of self-restraint in a way, in that I don't always need so much stuff. And buying a new thing isn't always the answer. We get caught up in this a little bit in the sort of green movement, I think, right? Where, because we find out that plastic bottles going in the ocean is really terrible, we decide that we need to buy a reusable water bottle. But then somehow, now we have like 15 reusable water bottles, which consuming more and more and more goods also isn't the solution, right? When you go to like an event or something, sometimes they give you like a bag of goodies, and in it is like another water bottle, right? So, just to take an example, and and another way that I sort of look at it is like sometimes we think the modern solution to our modern problems is to buy something, right? I look around the house, I notice I have a problem and I need to solve it. And then usually what we do is just hop onto Amazon and see if Amazon can provide the solution to that household problem. And I guarantee you, they will sell you some sort of solution. But in recent years, I've tried to, I call it sort of triaging, right? So the first thing I do is I don't look at Amazon. The first thing I think is, can I use something I already have? Or can I borrow something from a neighbor or a friend? Or can I find a hand-me-down from someone in the neighborhood or someone nearby? So in my area, we even have whole entire Facebook groups called, Buy Nothing. And what is encouraged is just the exchange and trade of free things and labor and help, so that there's this idea of being able to support each other in ways that don't require the exchange of money. And I bet there's one for your town too. And if there's not one, you can start it, right? And it's actually one of the most useful things about Facebook is this group. The more people in my area that join the group, the more things we can exchange. So It's a thing that benefits from, like, the more people are in it, the better for everyone, right? Anyhow, if I can't borrow it and I can't get it used or secondhand, then do I need to buy something new? And if I need to buy something new, can I buy it locally rather than at Amazon, right? Like, so there's like a last resort. I'm trying step 1, step 2, steps 3, step 4. So I'm not just constantly adding. There's an interesting psychology experiment in which engineers were given a problem to solve. And nearly every single engineer tried to add something into the problem in order to solve it, right? Add a piece here, add a machine here, add a widget over here, some addition. When actually the most efficient and effective solution to the problem was actually to remove something, to take something away. And yet we don't often think in those terms. So, I wonder if, there are ways in which the solution to my problem is actually to take something away. Is the solution to my problem of not finding enough time to meditate, to take something else away so that I can have time? Absolutely it is. And is, as I'm sure many of us have experienced, like, the more stuff you have, the more you have to take care of, and then the more stuff you need to take care of those things, right? So maybe the solution in many, many cases is to take something away, to simplify, to clear it out. And in that way, the word austerity, it doesn't have to mean something extreme. Austerity can just mean being in that mindset of trying to, like, do less or take less, consume less. So that's one way. There's so many ways to think about these things, So let's look at the verse. Yoga Sutra, book 2, number 43. Kayendriya siddhir ashuddhi kshayat tapassaha. Kayendriya siddhir ashuddhi kshayat tapassaha. Kayendriya siddhir ashuddhi kshayat tapassaha. One translation is, when impurities are destroyed through self-discipline, perfection of the body, mind, senses is achieved. Sometimes what I like to do, especially if the focus of the month has to do with a Yoga Sutra in particular, or a shloka from Bhagavad Gita or Hatha Yoga Pradipika, is I like to take out all my translations and look at each one of the translations to see if I can get a better sense for the meaning. And also that gives me a lot of little inspirations that I can pull from throughout the month. So even between the two that I'm going to refer to now, I feel like I will have, nearly plentiful threads to sort of draw from and integrate into classes for the month. So here's one I found that was quite inspiring. Swami Satchidananda. So, In our lives, there are hundreds of opportunities for tapas. Even a cloth must undergo tapas to become clean. What will the laundryman do with my cloth? Will he fold it and put some sandalwood on it and a flower on it and give it back to me? No. First, he will soak it in boiling water with soap. Then he'll beat it every which way. Then he'll tumble and roll it and squeeze it in the washing machine. And after that, he'll dry it in a hot chamber and iron it. Only then does the cloth lose all of its dirt and grime. It undergoes tapasya to become pure. The laundryman has no hatred for the cloth when he does all those things to it. He only wants to make it pure and clean. It is out of love that he inflicts this series of pains. The mind, too, must be washed and squeezed and tossed and dried and ironed. So, even when we're going through those like pains of meditation, sometimes it's just the pain of getting there, making the time for it. Sometimes sitting there feels quite painful as restlessness or boredom start to arise. Sometimes there's literal pains, like the hips getting used to sitting, and the back muscles getting strong enough to sit longer and longer all the time. So those pains we wouldn't consider like bad pains, but they are pains that we have to sort of confront and even push through in order to make progress, much like asana practice. I was thinking earlier today about the idea that meditation is the most like unnatural feeling thing we can do in our minds. And you know how I know that is that almost daily someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, I can't possibly meditate. My mind is just way too busy." Now, because every single person that tries to meditate experiences that, I know it's a nearly universal experience. So, if you're the unique person whose mind is naturally prone to meditation, then congratulations. For the rest of us, it does feel like meditation, that's impossible. My mind is just, wilding over here. And so the natural feeling state of the mind is this sort of restlessness, this sort of following each thought as it comes up and being sort of whirled around, yeah? And it feels quite unnatural to cultivate a focus, a concentration, and a meditation in the midst of having this busy, busy mind. And yet the point of meditation, the purpose, is said over and over again to be the ability to either reconnect or feel or unite with the natural state of consciousness. In other words, our most natural state is that clear, bright, shining mind. And yet it doesn't feel like that at all. So we have to go against what feels natural in order to sort of feel what is kind of most natural to us, or so the wise yogis of the past say. So how do we feel about that? That seems like a pretty big contradiction and interesting to think about. Here's another version that I also found quite inspiring in a different way. This is from Iyengar. And Iyengar says, oh, that's such a, where is it? Oh, yes, Iyengar says, Ahimsa cannot be properly understood without reference to tapas. Tapas is the inner himsa, which means violence, by which we create the possibility of outer ahimsa, or nonviolence. Ahimsa cannot exist alone. A complementary force must necessarily exist. Mahatma Gandhi would never have been able to summon up the implacable peacefulness which moved an empire without his ruthless attitude towards his own self. Violence is perhaps too strong of a word for tapas, but it is a burning inner zeal and austerity, a sort of unflagging hardness of attitude towards oneself, which makes possible compassion and forgiveness for others. Just observe what came up for you during that practice. During that passage. For me, it's really interesting that he brings up ahimsa in particular. Because often, in modern times, people have misconstrued the practice of ahimsa, one of the yamas, as being, ahimsa also should apply to myself. I want to be gentle with myself, so I don't want to give up hamburgers because that would be hard for myself. And that, especially given this passage, shows itself to be a vast misinterpretation of ahimsa, right? Ahimsa is how we behave towards others. Now, what Iyengar is saying is really interesting here, to me anyway. I hope it's interesting for you. It's really interesting here because he's saying that it actually does take a little bit of effort, a little bit of discipline, a little bit of practice, a little bit of not giving oneself too much of a pass on it. You know what I mean? And that little bit of hardship on oneself is actually what gives us the capacity for great compassion towards others. And I guess, there's really no two ways about it. He really says all that in such a short passage, and it does evoke, not only veganism but also environmental activism. That sometimes we're going to have to choose to be uncomfortable. Sometimes it may take being a little uncomfortable because it's the right thing to do for the planet. Because my consumption doesn't take precedence over, my ease of being shouldn't necessarily take precedence over clean water and clean air and the ability for life to exist on the planet. So that's another way to look at tapas.